was pleasantly surprised with how kind of complex and layered this film was. I had a really good time with it. On the surface, it feels like a movie you've probably seen a bunch of times before. What it's about, you have this girl named Nora and this guy named Hae Sung. They grow up in Korea as kids, and at the age of 12, she has to move away to Toronto. She and her family immigrate to Toronto, then she will eventually move to New York because she wants to be a screenwriter. And this movie is going to chronicle and tell you about their lives as they grow up, from being kids to adults, and how their friendship kind of matures and what that means in life. If there's one word I would use to describe this film, it's authentic. I feel like this movie kind of captures the human experience better than almost any other film I've ever seen. I found this movie to be oddly humbling because a lot of us kind of view life linearly as we progress through it. Like, we're younger at a certain point, then we go through our adolescence, then we become adults, and then we meet certain people, and then maybe we have experiences with them, and then we move on. I think this movie's pretty much perfect at depicting the human experience when it comes to just how circumstantial life really is. It's almost like a choose your own adventure book. When you reach that fork in the road, you have to make a decision. Like, do you want a life with this person? Do you not want a life with this person? Do you want to take this job? Do you want to take this job? Our lives are composed of thousands of little micro decisions on the daily that will eventually shape who we end up being, who we end up knowing, and how our lives fall into place. A giant butterfly effect, if you will. And I'm one of those people who's constantly thinking about this, and I find the concept of fate pretty mesmerizing, so I thought what they were trying to say in this movie was very profound. Now, this is not going to be a movie for everybody. This is definitely a different spin on the romance genre. It's very slow, a lot of just people looking at each other, a lot of very basic dialogue. But I also think that type of filmmaking really grounds a movie like this and makes it feel almost like you're not even watching a movie. This just feels like you're watching two strangers' lives play out, which is what makes this movie so powerful when it does work. As I've already said, this movie manages to capture the human experience more than nearly any other movie I've seen in recent memory, because a lot of the time when you watch a romance genre movie, or any movie in general, it feels like you're in a movie. Like, the acts that people are doing would only exist in the realm of a movie. People get to know each other way faster than they normally would. It feels like people don't have to go to their jobs. There's a bunch of plot conveniences. This movie's tackling the romance story through the lens of real life getting in the way, and that is something that is not really ever hit on in movies, at least not in my opinion. You know, it sounds really good to just upend your life to move to the other side of the world to hang out with someone you feel like you could connect with. But at the same time, we have jobs, we have lives, we have goals. There are things that get in the way circumstantially that keep us from actualizing what we think our purpose might actually be. When they're only 12 years old, Nora and Hae Sung basically have everything in common. They're best friends, they have crushes on one another before she eventually has to move to the other side of the earth. And they don't speak for about 12 years, but then they meet each other again online 12 years later and they start Skyping daily. And it becomes glaringly apparent to both of them they still have a superb connection. They are really into one another. But the key to this movie is nuance, because at the same time they realize this is kind of not healthy, this cannot keep happening, because he's in Korea, she's in Toronto. They have wildly different life expectations. Like, the goals she has for herself now are wildly different from when she was a kid. It's almost not fair to either of them to just tie themselves up over something that will never become. So fast forward another 12 years. Eventually, they're going to actually meet face to face in New York and spend a weekend together. And this is where this movie really picks up, in my opinion. If you're somebody who's ever been in this situation or experienced this, and I'm going to be honest, I feel like almost all of us probably have at some point in life, in some facet of life. Even if you haven't somehow, I feel like this movie does a really good job of making you feel like you could connect to these characters and sympathize with what they're kind of struggling with internally. He comes to New York for a weekend to spend some time with her and reconnect, but she's been married for 7 years now. Their lives kind of moved on. It's really exploring the concept of fate and like destiny, and if we don't act on that, or maybe there are just certain windows we can act on that. I thought about this concept before, even before this movie, like the concept of a soulmate. Like, is there somebody out there that's just perfect for each and every one of us? But at the same time, we might not ever even meet them or get to actualize that in the form of a life. Like, it's just kind of out there. Like, that's what fate means. Like, can you just miss fate? Is fate timing? Like, can you pass up fate? Is fate inevitable? Like, this movie's kind of asking all of these things in a very subtle way. And I really only think this movie works because of the acting, because as I've already said, there's not a whole lot going on in this film. It's just people talking, catching up on life, looking at one another, like staring into each other's eyes. And as silly as that might sound, they really sell you on this connection of friendship that these two have had spanning the entirety of their lives. The two main leads in this have insane chemistry. They're able to display affection for one another just by looking at each other. And that's really important. It's not like in a lustful way, but if you've ever reconnected with a friend after many years, that's the feeling they kind of translate to you as a viewer through the screen, and you really believe the fact that these two have an unbreakable bond, regardless of where they end up. But yeah, this is not going to be a movie for everybody. This is a different spin on romance. It's a story about what ifs and regrets, like time and circumstance. It's kind of exploring the different possible realities we all live through. As I said, if you take the job, you live in a different reality. You skip the job and get a different job, you have an entirely new reality. This movie is just composed of that type of thinking. If you're somebody who likes existential films, this is a movie that I would definitely highlight you check out because it really does get that point across. Like, some things just are what they are. You can't hit pause like in the movies. Life just moves on sometimes. And one last thing, this movie's been out for a little bit of time, so maybe a minor spoiler. I really like that they didn't end up being very generic and just making these two end up hating each other and falling out, or one of these guys ends up being the bad guy. Because a lot of the time in romance movies, it's very linear. Like, husband hates this guy, new guy hates the husband, like who's gonna end up with who? It feels very organic to the fact that Nora and this other guy have built a life together. They're not just going to throw it away. And the way they're kind of conversing through this and talking about like her old connection with him and their new connection, I thought it was just very real. This whole movie just felt very real and very vulnerable, and I respected that. I thought it was very unique. I like the fact that it was just some things are what they are. Like, I'm happy for you, be happy for me, like we live our separate lives. It just didn't end up. And honestly, this is one of those films, I liked it, but I didn't know how much I liked it until like the final 20 minutes. I thought the final 20 minutes of this film, while there's not a lot happening, ironically, was like perfect cinema. A very beautiful but like somber movie. It's hard to describe, but it really resonated with me. I thought this movie was awesome. So if you guys did see Past Lives, comment down below. Let me know what you thought of it. I know it's a little bit older, but that's the point of this series. And oh yeah, comment down below once again anything you want me to tackle. As always, subscribe, join me down below, like the video. I love talking movies with you. I will see you in the next review. Peace.